That ring was my mother's." The words were a whisper, torn from the lips of a grimy-faced boy no more than 10. He stood trembling before the billionaire's cafe table, his eyes locked not on her face, but on the colossal emerald and diamond band glittering on her finger. Then he described the tiny, three-leaf clover engraved inside the platinum band, a secret detail known only to the woman who wore it, and the son who watched her put it on every single morning. The woman froze, her world of private jets and penthouse suites colliding with the desperate certainty in a homeless child's eyes. This was Isabella Vance, a tech titan worth $12 billion. The boy was Leo, with no last name and no home. Between them lay a $20 million ring and a single, impossible question. How could a boy living on the streets know a secret that died with his mother 7 years ago? The answer lies in a single, catastrophic night that transformed a family's life into a phantom echo, forever chasing its own lost treasure. For 10-year-old Leo, survival was a math problem solved daily with cold, hard variables. A bottle returned, 10 cents. A stale bagel from the dumpster behind the cafe, 1 meal. A safe doorway out of the wind, priceless. He navigated the city not by street names, but by resource maps etched in memory, where the charity truck stopped on Thursdays, which security guard would look the other way, the exact warmth of the vent outside the Grand Cafe where the beautiful people sipped $5 coffees. His mother, Anya, had been a jeweler. Not a storefront jeweler, but an artist who worked in a small, bright studio that smelled of metal polish and beeswax. Leo's earliest memories were the soundtrack of her workbench, the gentle buzz of the engraver's wheel, the soft asterisk click-click asterisk of gemstones being set into their prongs. She would sit him on a high stool and let him watch, explaining the anatomy of a ring, the secret language of hallmarks, the way light danced inside an emerald, the clover inside her wedding band. She engraved it herself, she told him, a tiny spell for luck. Their life was small and bright and full of that kind of magic. Then, 7 years ago, the fire. A faulty space heater in the apartment above theirs turned their building into an inferno. Leo, just 3, was pulled out by a neighbor. Anya never made it out. The official report listed no remains recovered, only a category, presumed deceased. With no will and no close family, Leo became a ghost in the system, bouncing between overwhelmed relatives until he slipped through the cracks entirely onto the streets. He held onto 2 things, the muscle memory of his mother's craft and the unshakable conviction that her ring had survived. He'd seen it on her hand that final morning. It had to be somewhere. For Isabella Vance, the ring was a trophy, a tangible proof of a climb that began in a trailer park. She, Built Vance, applied logic from a college dorm room idea into an empire that redefined data security, amassing a fortune that placed her among the most powerful women on the planet. She bought the emerald ring at a private auction 5 years ago, a celebration of her company's landmark public offering. The catalog listed it as Art Deco Emerald and Diamond Halo Ring, circa 1925. Provenance: European collection. It was exquisite, unique, and most importantly, it had no story. It was a clean slate. She loved that. Her life was a series of meticulously managed narratives. The ring was a beautiful, silent object. Until the boy. When Leo first saw the ring glinting under the cafe's string lights from his spot by the vent, his breath stopped. The specific curve of the diamond halo, the way the emerald was cut, slightly asymmetrical, a pear shape with one soft, flattened edge, it was unmistakable. It was his mother. The knowledge was a physical ache. For days he watched Isabella come and go, gathering his courage. The risk was astronomical. Approach a billionaire and accuse her of wearing a stolen ring. He'd be brushed aside by security or worse, arrested. But the ring was a piece of his mother, a fragment of his only home. So he waited for a moment when her bodyguard was distracted, when she was alone at the table, and he took his shot. His whisper about the clover wasn't an accusation. It was a key offered in desperate hope. Isabella's reaction wasn't the outrage Leo feared. It was a profound, unsettling stillness. Her face, usually a mask of polished composure, went pale. She didn't call for security. She didn't look away. She stared at him, then slowly, deliberately, twisted the ring off her finger and held it out to him in her open palm. "Describe it," she said, her voice low and utterly controlled. "Everything." Leo, his heart hammering against his ribs, didn't touch it. He just leaned closer, his voice gaining strength. "The platinum has a slight rose gold wash on the inside edge where it touches the skin. You can only see it in direct sun. The diamond on the north side of the halo, it's a fraction smaller than the others. My mom said she chipped it setting it and had to recut it. And under the gallery where the band meets the setting, there's a tiny letter A engraved." Isabella's hand did not tremble. Her eyes changed. The boy had just described three things utterly invisible to anyone who hadn't studied the ring with a loupe or loved the woman who made it. The auction house certificate mentioned none of this. She had owned this ring for 5 years and had never noticed the faint rosy tinge inside the band. A cold realization settled in her stomach. This was no street scam. The boy's knowledge was impossible, but it was real. She slipped the ring back on, a calculated move. "What is your name?" "Leo." "Come with me, Leo." It wasn't a request. She stood, signaling to her bodyguard with a subtle nod. The plan was clear in her mind: take him somewhere private, contained. Get the full story, then have her legal team handle it quietly, efficiently. This was a problem to be managed. But as Leo stood, clutching his thin jacket around him, something in his weary defiance reminded her of her own childhood reflection, staring back from a dirty window. She had just crossed a line and there would be no going back. The first question wasn't about the ring. It was about the fire. And his answer would unravel the careful story of her most prized possession, thread by terrifying thread. The silence in Isabella Vance's penthouse was a physical thing, thick and expensive, broken only by the hum of the city 40 floors below. Leo sat rigid on a sofa that cost more than a house, his worn shoes hovering above a rug woven from silk. Isabella stood at the floor-to-ceiling window, her back to him, the ring a cold weight in her hand. She had asked about the fire, and now she waited. His story came out in halting, factual bursts: the smell of smoke that woke him, the orange glow under the bedroom door, his mother's last push toward the neighbor's arms, the official chaos afterwards, the social workers, the forms, the distant aunt who took him in until the money from the life insurance ran out, then the foster placements that never stuck. He did not cry. He recited it like a report, a series of events that had happened to someone else. But when he described the ring, his voice changed. It warmed. He remembered the exact sound it made when she tapped it against her workbench, a clear, high asterisk ping asterisk. He described the tool she used to engrave the clover, a German-made burin with a rosewood handle, kept in a blue velvet pouch. Isabella turned from the window. She had built her empire on data, on the clean, binary truth of code. Human emotion was a variable she managed, not a language she trusted. But the boy's specificity was data of a different kind, irrefutable, granular, and deeply inconvenient. "Wait here," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. She walked into her study and closed the door. Her first call wasn't to her lawyer. It was to her head of security, Marcus. "I need a full provenance workup on the emerald ring purchased through Ellingham Auction House in 2018. Everything. And I need a discreet background check on a fire at 427 Elmwood Avenue 7 years ago. One casualty, Anya Petrova. Focus on property recovery logs." Then she called her personal assistant. "Cancel my afternoon and bring a meal into the living room, something substantial." When she returned, Leo hadn't moved. A tray of food sat untouched on the table before him. He was watching a photograph on the wall, a black and white image of a circuit board. "You don't believe me," he said, not as an accusation, but a simple statement of what he saw as fact. "I believe in evidence," Isabella corrected, sitting across from him. "You have given me testimony, now I am gathering corroboration." She nudged the tray toward him. "Eat, you'll need your strength." It was a transaction. He ate. She watched, and for the first time she saw not a street urchin trying a con, but a child with the hollowed cheeks of long-term hunger, eating with the controlled precision of someone who had learned to make a meal last. A piece of data clicked into place. The estimated value of the food he was eating was roughly $200. His jacket was from a charity bin. The dissonance was staggering. Marcus's preliminary report arrived that evening. The facts were dry and damning. The Ellingham auction house had listed the ring as part of a European collection sold by a shell corporation registered in Luxembourg. The paper trail was elegant, opaque, and perfectly legal for a high-value, no-questions-asked sale. The fire report was more revealing. The Elmwood Avenue blaze had been ruled an accident caused by faulty wiring in the upstairs unit. The building was a total loss. The medical examiner's report for Anya Petrova listed her cause of death as smoke inhalation, but noted a peculiar detail. The body was found with significant thermal damage, but located near an interior bathroom, not an exit, as if she had been searching for something or hiding. No personal effects were logged in the property recovery section. The box was blank. Isabella stared at the report. A blank box where a ring should have been. A multi-million-dollar object doesn't just vanish from a crime scene. It is either destroyed, stolen, or never there. But Leo's memory placed it on her hand that morning. So it had survived. How did it travel from a charred bathroom in a working-class apartment to a gilded auction catalog? She authorized Marcus to go deeper, to bypass the official channels. He used contacts in the police department and the insurance world. 2 days later, he delivered the pivot. The initial responding officer on the Petrova fire was a veteran named Frank Dormer. He retired 6 months later with a sudden, unexplained down payment on a house in Florida. The insurance adjuster for the building's policy was a man named Carl Riggs. He was fired a year after the fire for procedural irregularities. Both men are still alive. Isabella felt the narrative she'd constructed, a simple, tragic loss and an innocent auction purchase, begin to fracture. Connect them, she instructed. Meanwhile, Leo remained in the penthouse, a ghost in a gilded cage. Isabella put him in a guest suite, provided clothes, and assigned a quiet, kind member of her staff to look after him. She expected gratitude or at least relief. Instead, she found a simmering, watchful tension. He wasn't waiting to be saved, he was waiting for a verdict. One afternoon, she found him in the library, staring at a display case containing a rare first edition. "They're just things to you, aren't they?" he asked. "They are assets," she said automatically. "My mom used to say jewelry isn't about the stone or the metal, it's about the story it holds, the memory it carries. That's the real value." He looked at her. "You bought the ring, but you didn't buy the story. You didn't even know there was one." The word struck a nerve Isabella didn't know she had. She had spent a lifetime acquiring things to distance herself from the story of the girl in the trailer park. She surrounded herself with beautiful, storyless objects. And now, a boy was telling her that the most beautiful one she owned was haunted. Marcus's next update confirmed it. Frank Dormer, the retired officer, under the guise of a follow-up insurance inquiry, had admitted to a chaotic scene. He vaguely recalled some jewelry being bagged by the fire investigator for safekeeping, but couldn't recall the chain of custody. Carl Riggs, the fired adjuster, was more definitive. In a recorded call, he stated, "That whole file was a mess. The building owner was underinsured, the tenant had a basic policy. But there was a separate rider for her professional tools and a piece of custom jewelry. The payout for that rider was processed quickly, to the estate of the deceased, but the jewelry itself was never recovered for appraisal. It was listed as presumed destroyed." "Who received the payout?" Isabella asked, her voice cold. "The estate executor, a man named Simon Price." A new name. A quick search revealed Simon Price was a mid-level lawyer who had handled a few small estates in the city. He had no connection to Anya Petrova except as the court-appointed administrator. Marcus dug further. Price had closed his practice 3 years ago. His current whereabouts were unclear, but his bank records showed a series of large, irregular deposits in the months following the fire, culminating in a wire transfer to an account in the Cayman Islands. The timeline coincided perfectly with the sale of the ring to the Luxembourg Shell Corporation. The picture was now horrifyingly clear. It wasn't a simple tragedy followed by a legitimate sale. It was a coordinated theft. The ring had been salvaged or looted from the fire, the insurance claim had been fraudulently processed, and a chain of compromised men had laundered it into the legitimate auction market, where Isabella, the perfect high-profile buyer, had innocently purchased it. She wasn't just an owner, she was the final piece of the cover-up. She stood in her pristine office, looking at the skyline, feeling a nausea that had nothing to do with physical illness. Her fortune, the very symbol of her escape and success, was built on discerning value, and she had just discovered that her most cherished possession was a blood diamond of a different kind, stained with a child's trauma and a web of greed. She had a choice: quietly return the ring to Leo, write a check to make him go away, and preserve her own curated world, or tear the whole rotten story open. She walked into the living room where Leo was looking at a tablet, learning about gemology. He looked up. "You found something bad," he said, reading her face with an accuracy that was unnerving. "I found a crime," Isabella said quietly, "and you were the victim, so was I in a way." She sat down, the power dynamic in the room irrevocably shifted. The ring was stolen from the fire scene. The insurance money was stolen from you. Several men made a profit, and then I bought it not knowing any of this. Leo absorbed this. The anger she expected didn't come. Instead, a profound sadness settled over him. So it's true, it was hers, and they took it. Yes, she took a deep breath, a CEO deciding to greenlight a perilous, necessary project. "I am going to get you justice, Leo, and I am going to get you your ring back. But to do that, I need to use my name, my resources, and my reputation in a very public way. It will be messy. It will put you in the spotlight. Are you prepared for that?" He looked at her, this billionaire who had lived in a storyless world, now offering to blow hers apart. He thought of his mother's laugh, the smell of beeswax, the tiny clover for luck. He nodded just once. "What do we do first?" Isabella's smile was thin and sharp. "First, we call a press conference. Then we sue everyone." But as she said it, a warning from Marcus flashed in her mind. Simon Price, the lawyer at the center of the fraud, hadn't just disappeared. His last known phone call before vanishing was to a number registered to a holding company with indirect ties to the Ellingham auction house itself. This wasn't over. They weren't just exposing a past crime. They were poking a hornet's nest of present, powerful interests who had everything to lose. And the first sting was going to come from a direction she never saw coming. The press conference was a controlled detonation. Isabella Vance, with Leo standing solemnly beside her, laid out the facts with the crisp clarity of a boardroom presentation. She displayed the fire report, the insurance payout records, the bank transfers tracing back to Simon Price. She did not accuse the Ellingham auction house by name, but the implication hung in the air, thick and toxic. She announced a $20 million civil lawsuit against the estate of Anya Petrova's fraudulent executor, the insurance adjuster, and the unnamed John Doe entities that had laundered the ring. And then she placed the ring itself on the podium. "This object," she said, her voice echoing in the stunned silence, "belongs to Leo Petrova. It is not an asset, it is his inheritance, and I am returning it." The media explosion was instantaneous. Billionaire in heirloom heist drama. Homeless boy's billion-dollar rescue. Isabella was portrayed as a ruthless capitalist turned unlikely hero. Leo was the plucky orphan. The public, and more importantly the legal system, now had eyes on the case. The first sting came not from the shadows, but from a gleaming office tower. Ellingham Auction House issued a statement within the hour. It was a masterpiece of deflective outrage. They expressed shock and profound disappointment at Ms. Vance's irresponsible and defamatory insinuations. They emphasized their impeccable 50-year reputation, their rigorous, multi-layered provenance verification process. Their statement concluded with a chillingly polite threat. "While we sympathize with the child's situation, the acquisition of the ring by Ms. Vance was conducted in full accordance with the law. We have full confidence in our processes and our legal team, and we will defend our reputation vigorously against any unfounded claims. Isabella's lawyers were prepared for a fight. What they weren't prepared for was the second, more insidious wave. Online, a counter-narrative began to crystallize. Op-eds asked if this was a cynical publicity stunt by a tech CEO with a slipping stock price. Influencers questioned Leo's sudden appearance, hinting at a coached performance. A former social worker, anonymously sourced, gave a quote about suggestible children in traumatic situations fabricating memories. The story was being flipped. Isabella was no longer the hero. She was a manipulator exploiting a vulnerable child for good PR. Leo was no longer the victim. He was a pawn. Worse, the legal machinery Ellingham set in motion was formidable. They filed a motion to dismiss, arguing Isabella had no standing to sue on Leo's behalf, as she was not his legal guardian. They subpoenaed all of her communications since meeting Leo, aiming to find evidence of coaching. They demanded Leo undergo a psychological evaluation to assess the reliability of his claimed memories. It was a brutal attritional strategy designed to drain Isabella's resources and, more crucially, to re-traumatize Leo. Isabella watched Leo retreat. The boy who had faced hunger and cold with stoicism was wilting under the microscope of doubt. He stopped talking about his mother. He began having nightmares. One evening, she found him staring at the ring, now kept in a secure case, not on his finger. "They think I'm lying," he said, his voice small. "No," Isabella said, a fury burning cold in her chest. "They know you're telling the truth. That's why they're trying so hard to make you doubt it. It's the oldest trick in the book." For the first time, her drive wasn't just about justice or cleaning her own ledger. It was about protection. She made a decision that shocked her own board. She filed for emergency temporary guardianship of Leo. The media circus doubled. Her opponents seized on it. Billionaire attempts to adopt her own human shield. But it was the only legal way to fight for him. The family court judge, a stern woman named Rivera, ordered a home study and a series of interviews. It was during this grueling process that Marcus delivered the "wait, it gets worse" moment. His investigation into the holding company linked to Ellingham had hit a wall, but by tracing the money from Simon Price's Cayman account backwards, he found something new. Before the wire to the Shell Corporation, there was an earlier, larger deposit into Price's account. It came not from an insurance company, but from a private numbered account. And that account, through a labyrinth of blind trusts, was linked to a man named Alastair Finch. Alastair Finch was a name known in very specific, very quiet circles, a discreet acquirer of difficult-to-sell assets, a man who specialized in turning hot art and stolen antiquities into cold, clean cash for a wealthy clientele. He was the whisper between the thief and the auction house. If Simon Price was the middleman, Alastair Finch was the architect. "He's not just a fence," Marcus explained, his voice grim over a secure line. "He's a facilitator for a network, and this network does not like sunlight." Isabella, going after Ellingham, was poking a beehive. Finding Finch is kicking the hive over. These people don't fight with lawsuits. They fight with accidents, with disappearances. Isabella's penthouse, once a symbol of impenetrable security, now felt like a glass target. She doubled Leo's security detail. She had her own car swept for bugs. The pressure was a constant, silent hum in the background of every legal meeting, every court appearance. The break came from an unexpected source, Judge Rivera. After a particularly intense session where Ellingham's lawyers aggressively questioned Leo, trying to trip him up on minor details of his mother's studio, Judge Rivera called a recess. She later summoned Isabella and her lead attorney to her chambers. "I have been on the bench for 22 years, she said, her eyes sharp. "I have seen coached children. I have seen fabricated stories. That boy in my courtroom is not lying. He is grieving. And he is being hounded. The motion for psychological evaluation is denied. However," she continued, "Ms. Vance, you have placed yourself and that child in the center of a very dangerous storm. Your guardianship petition is pending, but my immediate concern is his safety. This case has moved beyond a simple property dispute. She was right. 2 days later, the storm made landfall. Leo was in a secured SUV with 2 bodyguards being driven to a court-ordered meeting with a child advocate. At a busy intersection, a delivery van ran a red light and T-boned the SUV. It was not a subtle attempt. It was a message. The vehicle was armored. Leo was shaken but physically unharmed. One bodyguard had a broken arm. The driver of the van fled on foot and was never caught. The van was reported stolen the previous day. Sitting in a safe room with a pale but eerily calm Leo, Isabella's world narrowed to a single burning point. The law was a battlefield, but her enemies had just escalated to a different war. They weren't trying to win in court anymore. They were trying to erase the problem. Leo looked at her, his old street survival instincts fully reignited. They want to scare us into stopping. They have succeeded in scaring me, Isabella admitted, a raw honesty she never allowed herself. But they have failed to make me stop. In that moment, the last vestige of the CEO managing a crisis fell away. She was no longer just Isabella Vance, billionaire. She was the only wall standing between a child and the abyss. The ring, the lawsuit, the fortune, it all shrunk to insignificance. There was only the next move. She called Marcus. "Forget the civil case. We are done playing defense. Find Alistair Finch. I don't care what it costs. I don't care what lines you cross. Find him." Then she looked at Leo. "We are leaving tonight." They disappeared into a network of private safe houses, leaving the public battle raging but entering a far darker, quieter conflict. Isabella had all the resources in the world, but for the first time, she was playing a game where the rules were written in shadows, and the penalty for losing was not a financial loss, but a life. The hunt for the truth had just become a fight for survival, and the most valuable asset wasn't a ring, but the boy who remembered it. The safe house was a blank space, a silent apartment in a building owned by a shell corporation, filled with the hum of white noise machines. For Leo, it was just another unfamiliar room. For Isabella, it was a command center for a shadow war. She worked around the clock, her fortune now a weapon deployed in absolute secrecy. She hired former intelligence operatives to augment Marcus's team. She used satellite networks and data mining algorithms designed for corporate espionage to track financial ghosts. The goal was singular: find Alistair Finch, the man who turned stolen memory into clean money. They found him not in a tropical hideaway, but in a modest brownstone in Boston, living under the name Arthur Lowe. He was a man who valued anonymity over opulence. The surveillance photos showed a grandfatherly figure who frequented the public library and fed pigeons. The banality of evil personified. Isabella's team built a profile. Finch was a creature of habit, a man who believed his layers of insulation were impenetrable. They would use that confidence against him. The plan was not to arrest him. The local authorities could be compromised. The plan was to confront him, to get a confession, and to acquire the one thing that could shatter the entire network: his ledger. Finch was old school. He kept a physical, encrypted record of his transactions, a fail-safe against digital betrayal. According to a source Marcus turned within Finch's own organization, it was kept in a safe behind a false wall in his study. Isabella made the decision to go herself. It was a risk her security team vehemently opposed, but she knew that a man like Finch, who dealt in the abstract transfer of valuable stories, needed to see the human consequence face to face. She needed to look him in the eye and show him that the boy he had helped make an orphan was now the instrument of his ruin. She brought Leo, kept at a secure location nearby. "You deserve to see this end," she told him. The confrontation was a quiet, brutal piece of theater. Finch answered his own door. Isabella, with Marcus and 2 other operatives, stepped inside without invitation. She didn't introduce herself. She held up a tablet showing a photo of Leo's mother, Anya, and a photo of the ring. "You sold this," she stated. Finch's polite mask didn't slip, but his eyes flickered with recognition. "I'm afraid I don't know what you're." "Simon Price is in federal custody," Isabella interrupted, a bluff that landed with the force of truth. He's been singing for 2 days. He gave us you. He gave us the Luxembourg shell. He's giving us Ellingham. She took a step closer. Your insulation is gone, Mr. Finch. The only currency you have left is cooperation. Finch studied her, then glanced at the impassive faces of her team. He saw the absolute certainty in their posture. He was a calculator, and the equation had flipped. With a sigh that seemed to deflate him, he walked to his bookshelf, triggered a hidden latch, and revealed the safe. He worked the combination. Inside was a single, leather-bound journal. He handed it to Isabella. It's all there. The Petrova transaction is on page 47. The ledger was a roadmap of corruption. Page 47 was indeed a detailed entry, a description of the ring, the date of acquisition from Simon Price, the fee paid, and the coded identifier for the buyer, a code that matched Ellingham Auction House's internal system for no-questions acquisitions. But as Isabella flipped through, the scale of Finch's operation dawned on her. Stolen paintings, looted artifacts, jewels taken from war zones, all laundered into the hands of the wealthy and ignorant. The ledger was a weapon of mass destruction for the high-end art and antiquities world. They took Finch into their custody. Isabella's lawyers, working with a trusted federal prosecutor, arranged a discreet surrender. In exchange for the ledger and his full testimony, Finch would enter witness protection. The justice he faced would be invisible, but the damage he would do to his clients was incalculable. The dominoes fell quickly and publicly. Armed with Finch's testimony and the physical ledger, federal agents raided Ellingham Auction House. The CEO and head of acquisitions were arrested on charges of conspiracy, fraud, and money laundering. The story exploded again, but this time, the narrative was irrevocably fixed. The corrupt titans of taste versus the wrong child and the billionaire who listened. The civil lawsuit was settled in a single day. The insurance company paid out the original claim to Leo with punitive damages. The retired officer and the fired adjuster faced criminal charges. In a quiet courtroom with Judge Rivera presiding, Isabella Vance was granted permanent legal guardianship of Leo Petrova. There was no media fanfare. It was a procedural formality that felt to both of them like the first solid ground in months. They returned to the penthouse, but it was different. The silence was no longer empty. It was peaceful. A week later, Isabella presented Leo with the ring in its case. It's yours, truly, legally yours. Leo opened the case. He took the ring out, feeling its familiar weight. He didn't put it on. Instead, he walked to Isabella's workbench. She had installed one in her study at his request. He asked for a loupe and a strong light. He examined the ring with a professional focus that startled her. Then he found it. With a delicate tool, he pressed a nearly invisible seam on the inside of the band. With a soft asterisk click asterisk, a hidden compartment, no larger than a pinhead, sprang open. Inside was not a gem, but a tiny, rolled piece of paper. Using tweezers, he extracted it and unfurled it under the light. On it, in his mother's minute-perfect script, was a single word: Leo. He hadn't known it was there. He had never seen her open it, but in her final moments she must have tried to hide it to save this final message for him. The ring wasn't just a memory, it was a letter. He sat back, the weight of the 7-year mystery finally settling. He wasn't chasing a ghost anymore. He was holding her love in his hand. He looked at Isabella, tears finally freely streaming down his face. She knew, he whispered. Isabella, her own eyes wet, simply nodded. She understood now. The real value was never in the market price of the emerald. It was in the pinprick of hidden space and the word it held. In the months that followed, Isabella used a portion of the settlement to establish the Petrova Vance Foundation. Its mission was twofold: to provide legal and social support for children navigating the foster and homelessness systems, and to fund a specialized task force within the FBI dedicated to investigating art and heirloom theft. Leo, now enrolled in a good school and seeing a therapist, sat on the youth advisory board. He helped design the foundation's logo, a stylized clover. One evening, Isabella found him at the workbench, sketching a new ring design. For the foundation gala, he explained, a clover set with chips of emerald and diamond from the original stone. He had asked to have his mother's ring carefully dismantled. The large emerald would be recut into smaller stones to be used in the foundation's fundraising pieces. The metal would be melted down. The hidden compartment would be preserved empty in a display case. The story shouldn't be locked on one finger, he said. It should be spread around to help other people find their way home. Isela looked at this boy, who had transformed from a scavenger on the street to a curator of his own history, and saw the final, surprising truth. She had set out to solve a mystery and correct an injustice, but in doing so, she hadn't just given Leo a home. He had given her one, too. He had filled the storyless void of her life with a narrative more valuable than any asset, a family. The ring that started it all was gone, dismantled into 100 points of light. But the boy who knew its secret was safe, his mother's final message received, and the woman who listened had finally found a story worth telling. Their journey from a cafe table to this moment was proof that sometimes the most powerful forces in the world are not money or might, but memory and the courage to act on it. And that is where our story closes and a new one begins. From a whispered accusation to a dismantled ring, the journey of Leo and Isabella forces us to confront a quiet, unsettling question. How many truths are walking past us every day, hidden in plain sight, waiting only for someone to look closer? A billionaire chose to see a homeless boy not as a nuisance, but as a person carrying a key. A boy chose to see a glittering ring not as a symbol of a wealth he could never touch, but as a fragment of a soul he could never forget. In that collision, a hidden world of corruption was unraveled, not by detectives but by attention. We live in a world that often teaches us to look away, from discomfort, from complexity, from stories that don't fit neatly into our own. We are taught to value the price tag, the brand, the clean, storyless asset. But the tale of the emerald ring screams a different truth. The real treasure was never in the carat weight. It was in the microscopic groove of a hidden compartment. The real power was not in Isabella's billions, but in her decision, in a moment of profound disruption, to listen. The real inheritance was not a jewel, but a single word on a whisper of paper and the love that put it there. This story is a blueprint for a different kind of wealth, one built not on what you acquire, but on what you are willing to restore. Not on the walls you build, but on the bridges you choose to cross. Leo and Isabella each crossed a chasm of experience and circumstance that should have been impossible. In doing so, they didn't just solve a mystery, they built a family, and from that foundation, they are now building hope for others. So we leave you with this. The next time you see something that doesn't fit, a person out of place, a detail that seems off, will you look away? Or will you have the courage to lean in, to ask the question, to listen for the story? You may not find a $20 million ring, but you might uncover a truth that changes a life, perhaps even your own. If this story of memory, courage, and unexpected connection resonated with you, help us share more like it. Subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. Your subscription turns on the light for more journeys into the human heart. Let us know in the comments, what is a small detail you remember that holds a universe of meaning for you? We read every single one. Thank you for watching, for listening, and for being part of our community. May you always have the courage to see the story and the heart to honor it. Until next time.